Well, by the way, we're almost done with the semester. So one of the things that's happening is we're supposed to be reviewing each day with these readings the different books of wisdom that we read beginning last semester, though some of you weren't with us last semester. But I'm not going over them. We can do those books, the review in class. We have one more video after this for this semester, and then we break until the fall. Anyway, today I wanted to share with you a couple things, one of which should make you feel good. We're talking about the water that flows out of the rock after the Jews had been complaining. The place where this happened was named Massah and Meribah. Footnote, we click on it. Massah, Meribah. Hebrew words meaning, respectively, the place of the test and the place of strife, quarreling. Okay? The place was named Massah and Meribah, the place of the test, the place of quarreling, because the Israelites quarreled there and tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord in our midst or not?" Now, it's very hard to trust in the Lord, especially in times where everything seems to be up in the air, as it certainly was for them and as it is for us in many ways these days. But here's a footnote. What could this footnote be? Footnote D, Psalm 95, 8 through 9. We just read this last week. Do not harden your hearts as at Meribah, as on the day of Massah in the desert. There your ancestors tested me. They tried me, though they had seen my works. And remember when we read that, I said, well, you probably don't know what Massah or Meribah is, but because you've begun actually to read the scriptures, well, now you know. And now if people make a reference to it, it might stick in your head. I continue to be astonished at how my students know absolutely nothing. I don't mean my scripture study students. I mean the students in my other classes for Homeschool Connections, students from devout Catholic families, middle school and high school. For instance, if I ask the question, there's a reference in The Magician's Nephew, one of the Chronicles of Narnia, about coming into a garden through a gate and not climbing over the wall like a robber. And so if I say to the kids, well, where have you heard that before? In the Gospels, I give them a hint. And of course, they don't know. And they'll guess and they'll guess and they'll guess and they'll guess. We hear that at Mass every now and then. It's not as if they've never heard that reading from John, but they still don't know. So one of the reasons I've been doing this for 2 semesters now, and I did a little bit of it before, is this is needed. I mean, when the Protestants criticize the Catholics and say we don't know scripture, they're absolutely right. And I think it's probably worse than it's ever been. And I always quote St. Jerome, ignorance of scripture is ignorance of Christ. But you're making progress, students. Now, if somebody mentions Massah or Meribah, that's the place where the Jews grumbled while they were making their way through the wilderness, led by Moses, in spite of all of the plagues, in spite of the Passover, in spite of the parting of the Red Sea and it closing back over their pursuers, in spite of all of these things, in spite of the daily gift of manna from heaven, in spite of the quails that are driven to them, they don't trust God. But how many things has God done in your life over and over and over again, and you still don't trust him? It's human nature. It's fallen human nature. But that place itself is named after the quarreling and the testing. And so it sticks with the Jews in their religious history, in salvation history, as a mark and as a memorial. And it's mentioned again elsewhere in Scripture to remind them, to remind us, the new Israel, of how we behaved and continue to behave, testing and doubting, even in the midst of miracles. Let's look a little bit at St. Paul. Verse 7, be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption, but he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. And let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap. If we faint not, that means if we don't give up. As we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially unto them who are of the household of the faith. We should be doing good to all men, especially our fellow Christians. But how often we try to stick it even to our fellow Christians and turn the knife. Now, you know, karma isn't just an Eastern religion, a Hindu thing, a Buddhist thing. Karma is a word to express something that's built into reality. You will reap what you sow. Or as my dad used to say, quoting an old expression, what goes around comes around. If you continue to live a certain way, being unfair, being rude, just looking out for number one, eventually that comes back to haunt you in this life, certainly. And in the next as well. My father didn't believe in the next life, but he believed in this one. And that's what Paul's talking about. We will reap what we sow. If we sow to the flesh, we will reap of the flesh. And remember, flesh, sarx in Greek, means interest in this world, selfish interest, interest in the things of our unredeemed selves, the old Adam, our sinful natures. Whereas the things of the Spirit, if you sow to the Spirit, you will reap of the Spirit. If you sow to the flesh, you will reap of the flesh. Now, you're young students. For instance, physically, let's say you're out of shape. And even though you're a teenager, let's say you don't bother to get in shape and you get more and more out of shape. You eat junk food, you smoke cigarettes, you do whatever. Well, it could be that he still is a young person in 15 or 20 years. You may be hospitalized because of your health. You may get diabetes. You may get whatever. Of course, some people get sick through no fault of their own, but largely our health is within our control, as is our spiritual health. Sow to the Spirit, reap of the Spirit. Sow to the flesh, reap corruption. Because of the flesh is corruption. He means flesh rots and stinks when it dies. And if you put your faith in the things of this world and in the stuff that rots and stinks, that's what you will get in return. One more video this semester, and that happens tomorrow, God willing.